George Maharis's story begins in Astoria, Queens, on September 1, 1928, where he was born into a hard-working Greek immigrant family. He was the third of 6 children raised by his parents, Vassidos later called William and Demetra Maharis, who built a restaurant business that helped them survive the Great Depression. When the family later moved to Manhattan's Hell's Kitchen, George experienced firsthand both the struggles of poverty and the toughness of street life. Watching his father serve everyone from working-class dock workers to people with shady reputations gave George an early understanding of human behavior that would later shape his acting style. Unlike many children of immigrants, he grew up with a unique mix of cultural tradition and American ambition. His first dream was not acting, but singing. Classmates at Flushing High School admired his strong voice, and he worked hard to turn that gift into a career. He performed in musicals outside New York, taking any job he could find: construction, restaurants, and other hard labor to keep chasing his dream. Sadly, poor vocal training and overuse of his voice caused permanent damage to his vocal cords, and his dream of becoming a professional singer ended before it had truly begun. Still, that setback led him to acting, which became the true calling of his life. He trained at some of the most respected acting schools of the time, including Sanford Meisner's Neighborhood Playhouse and Lee Strasberg's Actors Studio, where he learned the method acting approach that defined Hollywood in the 1950s. His early performances on stage, particularly in plays like Death Watch and The Zoo Story, gained him attention for his raw, intense style. Hollywood soon noticed, and by 1960 he was cast in Otto Preminger's film Exodus, which was a major breakthrough. His tough, brooding screen presence reminded critics of Marlon Brando, and it was clear that Maharis was a star in the making. Maharis's real breakthrough came in 1960 with the television series Route 66. The show was groundbreaking for its time, filming entirely on location across 25 states instead of in studio sets. Paired with actor Martin Milner, Maharis played Buzz Murdoch, a tough, street-smart young man traveling across America in a Corvette. Their on-screen chemistry worked perfectly. Milner was the clean-cut dreamer, and Maharis was the edgy, rebellious counterbalance. The combination captivated audiences and made the show one of the most popular of the early 1960s. For George, fame came quickly. He became a teen heartthrob, appearing in magazines, posters, and even launching a short-lived but successful singing career. Despite his earlier vocal struggles, his single Teach Me Tonight climbed the Billboard charts, and he recorded 6 albums with Epic Records. The show also boosted Chevrolet's sales, as the Corvette became a symbol of freedom and adventure, featured prominently in every season. By 1962, Maharis was at the height of his fame, earning Emmy nominations and recognition as one of television's brightest young stars. But behind the scenes, his health was starting to fail. Long days filming in harsh conditions, sometimes 12 to 15 hours in extreme weather, took a toll on him. During one shoot, he stood in freezing water for hours and soon after contracted hepatitis from a contaminated injection. The illness forced him to take breaks from filming, and doctors warned him that continuing the show's brutal schedule could kill him or cause permanent liver damage. Maharis wanted time to recover, but producers refused to slow down production. This created deep conflict between him and the show's creator, Herbert B. Leonard. What began as concern over his health soon escalated into something much darker, tied to the unspoken secrets of Hollywood at the time. By 1962, tensions between George Maharis and the producers of Route 66 had reached a breaking point. Although his health issues were very real, he had been hospitalized and doctors provided written warnings. Producer Herbert B. Leonard accused him of faking illness. Leonard believed Maharis wanted out of his contract to pursue film roles, and this accusation became the start of a brutal legal battle. The situation grew more complicated because Leonard had also discovered that Maharis was gay, a fact that in the 1960s was considered career-ending if it reached the public. Instead of supporting his star, Leonard felt betrayed. He had marketed Maharis as a romantic heartthrob for female viewers, and, in his eyes, George's private life clashed with the image that had been built around him. The result was a complete breakdown of trust. Leonard and his production company worked aggressively to block Maharis from working elsewhere, even stopping him from appearing on The Ed Sullivan Show in 1963. Publicly, they painted him as selfish, unprofessional, and dishonest about his illness. Privately, they feared exposure of his sexuality, which could damage not only his career, but the reputation of the show. Maharis fought back, defending himself with medical records and speaking out against the old Hollywood system that treated actors like property. He insisted that he had given his best to the show, but could not risk his health. Although he eventually won the legal case and his contract was voided, the damage to his reputation was severe. The very system that had made him a star now worked to keep him from moving forward. When Maharis left Route 66 in 1963, the show never recovered. His replacement, Glenn Corbett, could not recreate the chemistry with Milner, and the series ended. A year later, what should have been the start of a long career in television instead became the beginning of Maharis's decline. After leaving Route 66, Maharis tried to establish himself as a film actor, but his career never took off. Between 1964 and 1969, he starred in several movies, including Quick Before It Melts, Sylvia, and The Happening, but most of them failed, both critically and commercially. His one notable performance came in the 1965 thriller, The Satan Bug, where critics praised his strong acting, but even that film did not perform well at the box office. As a result, studios began to see him as a financial risk. By the late 1960s, his star power had dimmed, and his roles grew smaller. To make matters worse, his personal life soon became the subject of public scandal. In 1967, he was arrested for lewd conduct in a sting operation targeting gay men, and again in 1974 for a similar charge. At a time when homosexuality was still illegal in many states and heavily stigmatized in Hollywood, these arrests all but ended his chances of making a comeback. Casting agents stopped calling, and producers saw him as too controversial to risk. Even his decision to pose nude for Playgirl in 1973 backfired, drawing more attention to the rumors about his sexuality rather than silencing them. By the mid-1970s, Maharis was struggling to find steady work. He appeared in small television roles and low-budget films, but the days of leading men stardom were gone. In interviews, he often expressed frustration that Hollywood had turned its back on him. Not because of a lack of talent, but because of prejudice and a scandal-driven culture. His decline was not unique. Many actors of that era faced similar fates if their private lives clashed with the image the studios wanted to sell. For Maharis, the combination of illness, legal battles, and societal intolerance was simply too much to overcome. By the 1980s, George Maharis had largely stepped away from major Hollywood productions. While he still made guest appearances on popular shows like Fantasy Island, Murder, She Wrote, and others, these roles were minor and often forgettable. Realizing that his days as a leading man were over, Maharis turned his energy toward a new passion: art. He became a dedicated oil painter, creating impressionistic works that eventually found recognition in galleries such as the Elizabeth Collection. In Rochester, New York, this new career allowed him to live quietly and creatively, far from the pressures of Hollywood. He also managed his investments carefully, ensuring that he could live comfortably in his later years. Unlike many stars who fade into obscurity with bitterness, Maharis seemed to accept his new life with grace. When asked in the 2000s about his retirement, he said he was happy painting, still active, and enjoying the peace he had created for himself. He split his time between Beverly Hills and New York, rarely appearing in public, but never completely forgotten. In 2019, filmmaker Quentin Tarantino even mentioned Maharis in an interview about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, placing him among a group of iconic actors from the 1960s. For Maharis, this was a rare acknowledgement that his contribution to television history had not been erased. His portrayal of Buzz Murdoch in Route 66 remained his legacy, a character that embodied both the restless spirit and the struggles of a changing America. George Maharis lived a long life, passing away on May 24, 2023, at the age of 94 in his Beverly Hills home. The cause of death was complications from hepatitis, the same illness that had first derailed his career in the early 1960s. In a sad twist of fate, the disease producers had once accused him of faking was the very thing that followed him until the end of his life. His caretaker and friend, Mark Bahon, remembered him as a kind man, an artist, and someone who would do anything for anyone. Although Maharis never married and had no immediate family, he left behind a legacy as one of television's first true anti-heroes, a symbol of both Hollywood's promise and its cruelty. His life was a reminder of how quickly fame could vanish in an industry where image mattered more than truth. Yet, his influence lasted. Route 66 remained a cultural milestone, and his story continued to inspire conversations about the struggles faced by gay actors in an intolerant era. Maharis should be remembered not for scandal, but for the strength he showed in pursuing his art, both on screen and later on canvas, even when the world tried to silence him. His journey is both a cautionary tale and a tribute to resilience, proving that even when fame fades, true passion endures. The career of George Maharis is also important when we look at the larger history of Hollywood and how it treated stars. During times of social and cultural tension, in the 1960s, the entertainment industry was at the height of glamour. But behind the shining lights, the rules were strict and unforgiving. Actors who were linked to scandal, whether about money, health, or personal life, often found themselves locked out of the very system that had once celebrated them. George's story is a perfect example of this cruel reality. He was loved by millions of fans, praised for his talent, and respected as a rising star. Yet a single rumor or scandal was enough to bring everything crashing down. The system gave little room for forgiveness. Hollywood did not protect him when he was most vulnerable, whether due to his sickness or his personal choices. Instead, the people who once worked closest with him distanced themselves, fearing that they too might lose opportunities. His struggle reflects the hypocrisy of an industry that built its wealth on the charisma of its actors but was quick to abandon them in the face of public pressure. This treatment was not unique to Maharis, but his case remains one of the most visible, especially because he had reached fame so quickly and was then pushed out just as fast. The lesson his downfall gives us is that Hollywood of that era was less about loyalty and more about maintaining appearances, even at the cost of destroying a career that had so much potential left. In later years, many fans began to revisit the story of George Maharis with greater sympathy. The world had changed, and so had the way people viewed topics like illness, betrayal, and privacy. What had once been seen as scandalous was later understood as human struggle. Many began to recognize that George was not simply a fallen star, but someone who had been trapped in a system that refused to accept him fully. In interviews, he often carried himself with dignity, avoiding bitterness even when asked difficult questions about why his career ended so suddenly. This calm acceptance won him respect from those who looked back on his story. Younger generations, who discovered Route 66 decades later, saw not just a television actor, but a man who had the courage to walk away rather than sacrifice his principles or health. His later passion for painting showed that creativity was still alive within him, even if the screen no longer welcomed him. The revaluation of his life highlights an important truth. Fame is temporary, but the strength with which someone faces adversity leaves a lasting impression. Today, when George Maharis is remembered, it is not only for the role that made him famous, but also for the way he handled hardship with quiet grace. His story encourages us to look at celebrities as human beings who can make mistakes, suffer illness, and face unfair treatment. In the end, George Maharis became a symbol, not of scandal, but of resilience. His life reminds us that behind every face we see on screen, there is a person with struggles and stories that deserve understanding. Rather than judgment,